Hi, everybody, and welcome to week one. I appreciate all that you do as adult learners because I know this is not the only thing tugging at your time. So I appreciate you giving me some of that time. And I'm going to give you a quick overview of what we're going to do for week one and training in general. So, in week one, any of our weeks, we're always going to have this quick overview and our learning outcomes right up top, and then our learning activities. And this week, we happen to have our introduction, so feel free to go in and leave your video introduction. It's a flip grid. I hope you enjoy it. I always do. Faith integration is next. All we have to do is click the link right here, and it'll take us directly to that question. There's no need to be around in the left tabs for the different media and discussions and all that. Then we get into our overview and training, or another activity, which this week is going to be overview of training and learning. We have our multimedia and our discussion. That's our reading right here. So I wanted to just kind of give you my take on training overall in general, and I want you to specifically think about a couple things that can really affect training and design as you're designing this training, because that is what we're going to be doing throughout the class, is going through training design. And if you would, I always think of people, performance, and partnerships, because people are what matter. Their performance is what we're trying to affect, and we do a better job as we partner with organizations and other people, because if we don't focus on people, their performance, and partnering with others to make it all to make their work experience better, then we're kind of missing the point, because we want to focus on them. Because has anybody ever taught content? Well, I've never had content come back to me. I've never taught content, but we teach people all the time. So that's where our focus needs to be, not on anything other than how the learners will learn the content, because the content doesn't learn, people learn, and people learn the content. So that's kind of the key right there. So as we go through this, here's our challenge of design. You ready for this? Here's the challenge to kind of illustrate this. We all have a schema in our mind, and what that is schema is basically our set of experiences through life, education, growing up, everything else, and we use them as filters. So every time you look at something, you try to make sense of it. Your mind wants you to think it is so brilliant that it knows everything. So what it's going to do is it sees something, smells something, touches something. They start comparing it to all of our past experiences and trying to make decisions on what it is. So you have 10 seconds. State as many things as you can see in this picture. 10. So how many things did you see? So if you're like me, you probably saw about three. A badly drawn arrow right here, maybe a ship uh, edge and a triangle. So if you were a child, you could see 20, 30, pretty much unlimited of what this could be, because their schema is not in the way. And schema is what gives us our perspective as well. So that's why we want to partner, so we can grow our own perspective, so we can see the plate of spaghetti that somebody else sees with this. So here's our challenge that I'm going to challenge you to do throughout our 8 weeks of design. Guess what that is? Think like a kid. I want you to think like a kid, and kind of go past your schema, past your perspective, and grow that. Use our discussion forums to ask questions as well. Use me to ask questions too. Um, and as we ask those questions, remember that the questions we ask show more of our intelligence and the knowledge that we know. So question, because we all have a cell phone. If it's not in our pocket, it's probably somewhere pretty close. And that has more knowledge than any of us could ever remember. So our intelligence is based on the questions that we ask. So feel free to ask as many questions as you like. And as we go through the process, question everything, question yourself. Just pause and reflect and question. Actively wonder, what if? What if I did this? What if I did that? What if the material was like this? Just ask yourself those questions and enjoy the process, because you may get frustrated in the design process. That's actually just a part of the process. So enjoy it. You're going to get tools from the process, and the tools are exactly what you need at that time. That's what comes through just enjoying the process. So we know we're going to get to the end, and we know we're going to put together a good product. So we may as well just enjoy the process getting there rather than getting frustrated within the process. So training, and why is it important? And did you notice I made the first mistake? That's supposed to say training and design. So why is it important? So now you can feel free to make a mistake too. But what I would like you to do is stretch your abilities, stretch your perspective, and just feel free to make a mistake in here, because uh, that's what we do during the design process. Our final product is going to be fantastic. Getting there, we're going to probably have a few false starts. So training, why is it important? It's important when it's tied to organizational mission, goals, and values. Because remember, sometimes as trainers or designers, we want to tie it to educational needs and goals and make the educational piece the important piece. But the bottom line is nobody else cares about that except for those of us building and designing. So we want to keep our focus on the organization, their mission, goals, and vision, and what's in it for them with. Because if we think from their perspective, guess what? We're growing our own perspective. We're becoming better designers, better trainers, because we're meeting their needs rather than worrying about our needs. When you focus on people, you grow the organization as well. So our focus has to be 100% on the people and how they're going to learn what they need to learn, because what we're designing and building the training for, so they can go back to their work area and they can meet the mission, goals, and vision of their organization. So it's hugely important that we keep the focus on people. So what makes good training? This is what we call a tail flash from the last training program that I built for Lockheed Martin, and it was for the F-35. This was a hat trick. We did. I'll explain that. I'll talk about that later. But that's pretty cool. The hat trick. So I'm going to leave you hanging with that one. And the way that what makes good training is, imagine if we're building this here. This was a prototype aircraft, and we use lecture to train people on how to build it. Wouldn't be very effective, or if we just had them read a manual, wouldn't be very effective. But when we use group discussions, practice by doing, teaching others, these were the two: practice by doing and teaching others were two of the primary methods that we made sure that folks leaving the training environment and going to the work environment would transfer those skills over and still use them. Because if you use the non-engaging training or here, whether they bring that back to work or not, that's always a big question. But when we did the practice by doing and teaching others, the vast majority of people brought those skills right into their work area. And if someone else came in and didn't bring those skills, the people that were there were asking them why they weren't using the procedures and process and everything that they were trained to do. So they took ownership of the training, and that's because they practiced by doing, and they taught others as well. So it's those two processes make a big difference. Active learning makes a big difference. And think of training and design as relationship building. And the relationships that are built, remember, we're focused mostly on the learner or the student. So instructor to student, student to instructor, those relationships are always built. So how does your design affect that? That's one of the questions we're going to be asking ourselves. Student to student, how does our design affect the relationship students to students build? Student to curriculum, how do we affect that student to curriculum? How does our design affect the relationship that student builds with the curriculum? Because believe it or not, they do build a relationship with the curriculum, and that is through what Malcolm Knowles calls andragogy. So is the curriculum relevant? Is it meaningful? Is it timely? And we're going to be reading all about that this week, so I'm not going to spoil all of it, but read Malcolm Knowles' andragogy from that perspective. And also look student to medium. So is it just is it electronic? Is it paper-based? How face-to-face, online? How is it? So they're going to build a relationship with that medium. Is it easy for them to learn? The content may be difficult, something that they struggle with, but are they able to dive into that content and learn the content in a meaningful way? So I'm going to leave us with the choice. Are we ready? I hope we're ready. Because remember, we talked about schema. This is just a quick overview of training, and training is absolutely a passion of mine. Choose a number between 1 through 5. Multiply that number by 9. If your number is one-digit number, keep that. If it's 2 digits, add both of those digits together. Subtract 5 from your number, and this is your final number. Now we're going to transfer that number into a letter. So if you ended up with a 1, your letters A, 2 is B, 3 is C, 4 is D, 5 E, 6 F. So now remember your letter. Pick a country that starts with that letter. Take the last letter of your country and think of an animal that begins with that letter. So first we picked a country that starts with the letter that we just chose. Then we're taking the last letter of that country and think of an animal that begins with that letter. Using the last letter of the animal, choose a color. How many of us thought of an orange kangaroo from Denmark? And probably about 80% of us thought about an orange kangaroo from Denmark, because what happens is, remember our schema? Well, the choices I made with those questions made it so you came up with the number 4 from the math, because any number times 9, if you add the two digits together, you come up with 9, because 9 times 2 is 18, 8 plus 1 is 9. 9 times 3 is 27, 2 plus 7 is 9. Subtract 5, guess what happens? You have 4, and 4 correlated to a D. And because of our schema, Denmark is the most well-known country that starts with the letter D. And then there's a K at the end of Denmark. So guess what? Kangaroo is the most well-known animal with the letter K at the end. And it ends with O. And orange is the most popular color in O, with the letter O, starts with the letter O. So I personally don't know any other colors that start with O, but you probably have a much larger perspective than I do. So that is how our design choices and decisions can focus or push learners in a particular direction. So we want to make sure that we design and build in a way that captures multiple schemas, because remember, only about probably 80% of us thought of the orange kangaroo from Denmark. Another 20% probably came up with maybe a koala from the Dominican Republic or something like that. So that is how we're going to kind of jump into our class and begin looking. So I appreciate you taking the time, going into the discussion questions. I'll be active in there as well. And let's have a fantastic week.